So, yeah, of course, a shocking result. United States losing to Panama 2-1 in Atlanta in the second game of Copa America, a result that really does, guys, put this United States team behind the 8 ball heading into that group phase finale against Uruguay. Of course, the story of this game, the Timothy Weah red card in the 18th minute. The U.S. actually went up after that through a Falarian Balogun banger to make it 1-0, but Blackman equalized at 1-1 for Panama, and then Fajardo late made it 2-1 to the Panamanians. Let's get some post-game reaction here from the manager, Greg Berhalter.
We talked beforehand about the tendencies of this referee. We knew what he's capable of. And, you know, to be honest, I think we played right into his hands. And we made it, you know, that decision, I think, pretty easy. You know, Tim got bumped, he got checked, and he reacted. And, you know, he apologized to the group, and, you know, I think he understands what a difficult position he put the group in. Nonetheless, it happened, and, you know, as a result, you know, we lost this game, and, you know, we're going to have to move on and figure out how to win next game.
Timmy knows the mistake he made. That's it. He's going to learn from it. It sucks. It's not the way you want to put your team in that position. It sucks. It hurts. It's just the minimum. It's a lapse of judgment. It's just one simple second. You know, you respond to something, and it sucks. Yeah, disappointing.
I mean, I don't think disappointed comes close to describing what's happened. I mean, we've talked leading up to the game a lot about, you know, in our preparation that we've got to stay mentally strong, don't let our emotions get the best of us. We know the ref is, you know, not the best quality. All things like that we knew going into the game, and unfortunately, you know, a moment of a lapse of judgment of what to do. Tim's took a risk that's led to us having to play with 10 men. It's unfortunate, but, you know, I think especially since we've been through something similar in the Nations League, it's something we should have learned from, so that makes it even more disappointing. But nevertheless, the lads who stayed on the pitch, you know, we battled a lot through the game, and thought we were unlucky to not come away with at least a draw. But nothing we can do now. It's already done, so we just got to focus on getting ready for Uruguay.
I can't fault the effort of the group, especially after going down a man. The guys dug in, and we were close to coming out with a point. But you know, it's a shame because there was more in this game, and you know, silly decision by Timmy, you know, leaves us shorthanded.
Tim Weah on Instagram had this to say, quote, "A moment of frustration led to an irreversible consequence, and for that I am deeply sorry to my teammates, coaches, family, and our fans. Moving forward, I am committed to learning from this experience, not allowing an opponent to provoke me, and working to regain the trust and respect of my team and supporters. I'm so sad and angry at myself for putting my brothers through what they went through tonight." All right, Herc, just how big a mistake was this from Tim Weah?
Cost him the game. Quite possibly could cost them Copa America. They can get grouped. It was that big of a mistake. And Anthony Robinson said so himself there. You thought you would have learned from what Sergiño Dest went through and what happened in Trinidad and Tobago, that moment that put you in a precarious situation where you ended up losing that game. You still go through. You know, Copa America is different. This can see you not go through. This saw his team fight, claw, waste energy for an hour. Certainly we can question decisions that were made by the manager, but let's just focus on the start for a second. They're in that position because of Timothy Weah. And Tim will learn. But it's not about learning anymore. It's about acting with this team. This mistake puts them behind the 8 ball, not only in this game, but in this competition.
What do you hear when you hear Greg Berhalter talk about the tendencies of the ref? Is that what we should be focused on, or the act by Tim Weah, Kasey?
Well, clearly the act, but the tendencies are up. Let's just kind of dive into that for a second. I mean, yes, I mean, we all know referees that do a certain thing in a certain way, and you have conversations about it, but I think VAR takes a lot of that out of the equation because the main situations that happened in this, the referee gave a yellow card. It was VAR that intervened and said, no, you need to look at this because he strikes him in the head. And we all know that a strike to the head, no matter how soft or how hard, it's an automatic red card. So that wasn't the referee. Then the referee later calls a penalty on Cameron Carter-Vickers. VAR intervenes and says, hey, I think you might want to have a look at this. The referee, who has every right to overrule VAR, go look at it and admit that he was wrong. So I'm not sure where you're hammering the referee on this, because everything that may have been controversial or not, VAR intervened, and what we discussed yesterday, the right call was made. Maybe it took a little longer, maybe it did whatever, but I'm sorry, the VAR did its job.
It just sounds like an excuse. Why are you talking about the referees? This is something that maybe you should have this discussion with your team internally. But don't come out in the post game and say this, like the referee was a factor here. What, should have carded the player who ran into Matt Turner? Is that what you're looking for? Okay, give him a card. Did he red card Carrasquilla when Carrasquilla took out Crunch? Well, yes, he did. The referee wasn't as big of a factor as Greg Berhalter is making it out to be. The red card was a factor. Greg Berhalter going to back line to 3 was a factor. The individual mistakes by Anthony Robinson, that was a factor. The individual mistakes by the defenders or Ethan Horvath in that goal, in the second goal, that's a factor. The referee tonight isn't the reason you lost this game. There's so many different things you can point to. Just keep your mouth shut.
We've played.
You don't have to talk about the referees.
We've played in games, and actually there was a World Cup qualifying game at Saprissa in Costa Rica that we lost 2-1, where Greg, actually of all people, was the one. He kind of bumped a ball out for a corner, and the referee pointed to the spot, and then they scored a stoppage time penalty from something that never was.
Right.
That VAR would have intervened.
Correct.
Okay, there's an excuse on the referee, but the questionable calls in this match, we all looked back, and VAR looked back and got the right call. So I'm confused where this is a theme of the team right now in a discussion at this time.
Obviously, Weah, the principal scapegoat, and I think justifiably so, but there were 72 minutes played in this game after he gets the red card. How much responsibility are we putting on Greg Berhalter for the decisions in the starting lineup, the tactics once the red card occurs, and then the questionable, I think, decisions with his substitutions, primarily leaving maybe his best goal scoring. Well, I would say his best goal scoring threat late when he needed a goal to not bring on Haji Wright, to me, was a very big surprise. I think there's a lot to pick at with Berhalter in the back end of this game once Weah's off.
Yeah, we've not seen Haji Wright in this tournament, and he was the hottest player they had offensively going into it, sans Christian Pulisic. Listen, I've got to be very careful how I phrase this, because the principal moment here that cost this team is the red card.
Okay.
100%. No question.
Yeah, we cannot
if
ignore.
And or but. No,
yes, we cannot ignore how difficult it is to play with 10 men.
Now you're nitpicking, and
yes.
which we're analysts.
But given that, certainly the arrogance of going into a game and thinking you can manage a minutes count with Tyler Adams and it wouldn't be a problem, knowing you had to take him out, and then at halftime making a substitution of 3 players, knowing that you only got 2 left. You only have 2 left in a game where energy will be an issue. With the amount of physical output you're going to have to give to get a result in this game, going to a line of 3, which we have never seen from the U.S. men's national team, right? To then have your starting goalkeeper be one of those who comes out and the backup come in, knowing that you've got to be smarter. And the way they went about things, and then leaving one of your best goal scorers at the moment, most informed players at the moment, when you know you need a goal, it all comes into play. And Greg Berhalter and this team should be judged on that with an asterisk. Because I repeat, as soon as you go down a man, all bets are off. There were mistakes made by Greg Berhalter, absolutely. Mistakes made by players, individual players, absolutely. But the main reason they are in this position was that red card.
I think the interesting part about that is there was so many intangibles that contributed to the difficult decisions that Greg made. Because going in, you're thinking, okay, I don't have a problem keeping the same lineup. I don't have a problem if one of my best players is getting back into fitness and form, and I can have him for 60 minutes as opposed to 20 or 30 minutes. I have, other, questions, but all those questions get amplified because of the red card.
But don't you have to, as a manager, prepare for worst-case scenario in a major international tournament? By starting Tyler Adams, he's living in la-la land. He's thinking about best-case scenario and not the potential situation where he loses a guy 20 minutes in. If you only have 5 subs, you can't burn one pregame.
But remember,
if you're really, truly thinking about that situation.
Everything used to be 3 subs. And so the thought process was always, I had to be more careful because I only have 3 subs. And I think what happened when it moved to 5, managers could be a little bit more cavalier about decisions they made because they have. The other untangible. When was the last time your goalkeeper had to come out? So you don't think you have to then make a goalkeeping sub as well with 10 men, which then you think you need that more energy by having another.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of things that stacked up against Greg. Look, I take your point, and yes, there is a part where as a manager you have to be pessimistic. But I also think that there was enough things that kind of combined together that added to the difficulties in that decision.
To Seb's point, either you're healthy enough to play or you're not. There's no 45 minutes. Either you can help us play and win, or you can't. And that's got to be a decision that is made before. It's very arrogant to go into this game thinking, well, it's Panama.
Right.
What's going to happen? Tyler's going to go 45 minutes, we'll get him out.
But Herc, when you say yes, I mean, if you're fit enough to play, can we get you as much time as possible? I don't like the idea of making a decision before the game. I would say to like Tyler Adams.
Well, that's what essentially was made.
Well, I know that. But what I'm saying is go play. Go play as long as you possibly can, and then we'll read the situation as it plays out. The thought of some, data analyst telling me, well, he needs to play 60 minutes.
Correct.
And I would say, no, go play, and we'll judge it based on what we're seeing at that stage.
I think one of the biggest mistakes he made, and that coaches can make, is trying to experiment when you've never done it before. When have you seen the U.S. men's national team revert to a back line of 5, 3 center backs? And you do it in a moment where, more than ever, you need to keep it simple. You need to defend properly, well. You need to transition. You don't need another center back at that moment. If it's the last 10 minutes of the game, you're trying to hold the result, that's a situation.
And that center back almost comes in as a defensive midfielder just as teams are going more direct. What was, for the longest time, the most simplest formation to play was a 4-4-2, because your outside back marks the winger on both sides. Then if the outside back on the opposite team comes forward, the outside midfielder then has to mark. So what normally happens when you go into a man down, you go into a 4-4-1. And you have the guy that your striker then drops back and helps out, but he's the lone person up front, and then everybody else is really marked up really well. Yes, it gets much more complicated when you have 3 backs marking 2, and those 3 backs are then, and what did we see on the second goal? A run in front. Is that my guy? No. Is that the center guys? No, he ran in front of me. How easy is it to then drop into a position and say, you mark him, you mark him, you mark him, and then we all kind of cover around? Yeah, I think it's really tricky when you start doing things in that scenario that we haven't seen.
How do you deal with Weah in the dressing room now? Because he's obviously, a huge part of this team, and he's a guy who for years has been a key contributor, one of your most reliable players. It's not like you can just cast him off to the side.
No, and they won't.
No.
And they won't. And listen, Timothy Weah made a massive mistake.
And that's why it's a mistake.
Yeah, and the first one to recognize the mistake is going to be Timothy Weah.
Yeah.
I think he's got the character and the pedigree about him in his game to acknowledge that, and it's a very unfortunate situation for him because now he's going to feel responsible for whatever happens going forward with this U.S. men's national team in this tournament.
Is it safe for his teammates to assume that he's learned his lesson, or do they, Kasey, need to say something?
No, because there's no history. I mean, normally you see players that are hot-headed, and there's a series of issues. This is why it's so confounding to everybody, because it wasn't in his character. It wasn't as if you think, this guy's not going to react if somebody bumps him, and then he reacts, and you're kind of like, what did I just do? How did this just happen? Yeah. And that's, I think, so yeah, I'm sure everybody's like, yeah, no problem, man. I get it. You messed up. It sucks. As you heard Christian, exactly. It sucks, and yeah, it does, particularly because it was somebody that was so out of character.
Yeah, I think it's not how you deal with it going forward. I think it's the consequences of
Correct.
there is a
100%.
going forward for him.
Yeah.